Good evening, everyone. My name is MacKenzie Wilson. Welcome to another edition of Shop Talk, the only show dedicated to landlording in Alberta. I'm your host, MacKenzie, as well. Chris, my partner in crime, is enjoying some well-deserved time off. But I've got a good supporting cast around me tonight, as we got a pretty cool topic we're going to talk or get into. So I have Bill Biko over from the Educated Landlord, as well as two of our men that help run the show here on the community, Trish and Giedre. They're going to chime in as well. So we've got a full panel of landlords, and our conversation or focus of topic tonight is going to be around neighbors and neighbors of your rental properties, how to start that relationship on the right foot, and then how to deal with adversity or challenges that could arise in that relationship, especially if there's a bit of conflict with your neighbors and maybe your tenants of your rental property. So pretty cool stuff. Before we hop into that, I'm going to do a couple quick announcements, and I've got a good evening. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a quick hazard of a guess and say it's probably Lewis. Brett Turner over at our partnership with Redline Real Estate and Greenleaf Property Management is just committed doing our actual market update going forward. He's going to do them twice a month. So there's going to be a beginning of the month and a mid-month update. The beginning of the month, he'll start coming out. We should have it probably by Friday for this first release. He's going to do market numbers, MLS listings, days on market. He'll always give us a kind of a picture of both from a Calgary perspective and then across the Alberta market. So it's going to be kind of a very cool insight to see. And then he's also going to start tying in industry news as well, especially from an investing perspective. A really good way to get past the headlines and really understand the economical trends going on. And then once we see how those economic trends look like and how they apply to your rental property. So it's going to be a really good conversation. And if you've always had a little bit of trepidation, you were thinking about selling your rental property, or you were doing okay, but you weren't sure maybe in the long term of why or how long you'd want to hold the property for, having the insight to see where the market's going and understand the long-term effects will give you a lot of confidence in the knowledge, and that knowledge is power. And then you can make a more informed decision about your financial future and where you plan to put your wealth. So very, very cool. But all good. No worries, Lewis. I think you've got to grant the permission to StreamYard to allow to show your name onto the show. But at that note, anyways, let's hop into tonight's show all about neighbors. And without further ado, let's get our panel of esteemed and guest landlords on the show. In no particular order, I've got Bill in the top right corner, bottom left is Giedre, and then bottom right is Trish. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just excited to hear the word esteemed. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, Bill, you're right in that echelon of fine folks, good friends and landlords, and that's what this community is all about. And tonight's topic is one that we've had a few posts going on, dealing with the challenging dynamic of relationships between neighbors of your rental properties. They can be both a blessing and a challenge depending on how that relationship is set up and how it's handled. Also, depending on how the personalities you have living beside you, it's kind of like that saying, you can't pick who your family is. And neighbors kind of fall in that same group. You can't pick who's going to live beside you. And sometimes you can get a very challenging personality, even with doing all the best practices and trying to build a relationship, it might still go sideways. So if we end up going down that road, we're going to talk about how we can kind of mitigate that risk and maybe how to protect yourself as a landlord with your investment. So let's go through the table, and we'll do a quick introduction as always for the people that don't know who you guys are. Bill, I'll start with you. 30 seconds. Who's Bill Biko?
I've been a landlord for almost 20 years now. I've gone a little bit crazy. I've had over 1,500 tenants. I help people through a couple of different websites, educatedlandlord.com being one. And I like to help out in the group and try and provide some knowledge from my experiences to help other people along the way.
Perfect. Next
Did
one.
I keep it under 30? How'd I do?
That was like 9.5 seconds. So that's pretty flat. That's under 10. So awesome. Giedre, I'll throw it back to you now. So people who haven't met you before, I think it might be your first time on our show. So welcome. You've been a big help in the background running our community, helping Chris I. For people who don't know who you are, how you're, I guess, yeah, tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Giedre. I've been a landlord close to 12 years. First accidental landlord, that's the beginning. Was and currently the same. Done some illegal secondary suite development made from illegal legal, just full development. Done some Ontario. You live in Alberta, Calgary, but you'd have Ontario properties, so you have experience there. It's been everything interesting, good, bad, and.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the roller coaster ride of being a landlord. There's definitely the ups and there's definitely the downs. And Trish, you've been on our show a few times. For the folks that don't know who you are, who's Trish?
Hi. Yeah, I've been a landlord for not as long as Bill or Giedre. I have a few rental properties in Calgary, and we got into it after we joined a few associations to get us going because we believed in investing in the education first. So I have a lot of knowledge from other people's mistakes, but not as much my own.
And Trish, I'm on the very, very similar thought camp as you. I've been a landlord since 2016, at least full time. And similar, that's actually how I met Trish. Was through other investing groups, and again, all about collecting knowledge. And it's kind of how I've become a part of this whole community that we have. And yeah, and I have, well, now I'm down to 4 doors here in Calgary. I just sold off a couple, doing a bit of reorganization, getting a little bit smarter and wiser after learning from some mistakes made. But that's all part of the game and picture. So neighbors, let's talk about neighbors. I'll just share some general experiences, and then let's start about pros and cons of having a neighbor. We don't really have a choice because I don't know too many of us have properties where there are no neighbors unless you're doing the acreage game, which I think is a little bit challenging for most of us since we're mostly city based. Yeah, so generally my experience has been positive. Well, from one rental property, I've got a gentleman that is very talkative. So usually when I go down to my property, I'm spending quite a bit of time chatting over the fence to him. He keeps me in the loop of everything going on in the neighborhood, as well as he's nice enough to tell me when properties go for sale because he likes me so much. He wants me to buy more in this area. So that's the good side of it. And he's kept an eye on my property. He tells me when things are going on. When my other rental properties, I actually don't know any of the neighbors, and this was my first one I purchased. I should at some point do, as we've talked about on the show, is build those relationships to have a watchful eye on the property if I don't have anything going on there. And then where I currently live, I've legalized this basement suite. And I had people protest when I went through that process, but no one ever said anything to me. They just went directly to the city. So I had some conversations around that as well. I'm going to mix up the order. I'll go down to Trish, you first. I know you've got some rental properties as well. Tell me about your approach to managing the relationships and what past experiences you might have as well.
I found it kind of difficult. When we got into real estate, we decided that we would look at the kind of tenant that we wanted to deal with. So we bought single-family homes and developed the basement suite in all of them, and we did it before it was easy. So we spent way too much money.
Yes.
So, and I, from the courses that I had taken, I would bring over a gift basket and my business card and all of that to all of the neighbors, and I found quite a bit of resistance in the communities where I've been investing because the homeowners seem to think that they are more entitled than the renters and that whatever they decide is what I should make the renters do. It's been a challenge. And parking, if they park on the street and park in front of their house, I get a phone call because, of course, I put in my business card. I wish I hadn't.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's funny. There's certainly can be there's a perceived there's definitely like a perceived vision that owners have more rights than other people in the community, especially if they're tenants. So I mean, that's a good part of the conversation we should get into and talk about that dynamic and how to manage it, because there's also a lot of myths out there that, oh yes, rentals take up more parking on the street, when they've done empirical studies that simply just don't prove that at all. It's just simply not true. There's no difference from an owner owning 6 cars or 8 cars because they're a collector or they've got 4 or 5 kids, from a rental property with 2 suites and one person takes the C train to work and the other person has 1 car that rent the top and bottom. So there's certainly that aspect as well. So, all right, Bill, your experiences with managing your neighbors of your rental properties, what's just your quick take on it?
Quick take. Oh, I don't know if I could do that, but I'll give you a take anyway.
You can take 2 minutes in this one.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So we've found over the years, it is really important to make sure the neighbors know who you are and what you're doing. If they have an idea that you're the landlord and what's going on, they kind of feel like they have a little more control. And at times they will try and take a little extra control with that. And it's like, oh, you got to make sure you do this and you got to make sure you do that. And you kind of agree because it's got to fit what you're doing and it's got to fit into the scenario. But for the most part, if they know who you are, it's like having that extra set of eyes out on the street, which is huge as well. And, that's actually paid some good dividends for us when some of our more rambunctious tenants have been a little bit crazier. And I've met a lot of great landlords over the years doing that as well. Talk to them, find out it's a rental unit, and find out if you can get a hold of the landlord, and then share information with the landlord back and forth. And it just creates a much better working relationship. The other part that Trish was talking about, she's talking about mostly single family homes. And, the suited homes in rental districts seem to be a lot easier to deal with than going into the areas where they're more owner-based areas. When you're dealing with the rental-based areas, it just gives you that much more leeway to choose tenants and work with tenants and go with stuff versus that ownership aspect that you were running into, Trish, where the neighbor is so particular. And granted, there's bad tenants out there, but there's great tenants. There's so many great tenants out there, and some of them are better than the owners. And I've had a bad owner living across from me in my personal residence, and they were one of those people that had, I don't even know how many vehicles they had. It was like 7 or 8 vehicles. They were always parked in front of my place. They were difficult people. They were horrible, and they were owners. So there was nothing we could do versus knowing who your neighbors are and knowing who the landlords are and just nudging people in the right direction. So is that my 2 minutes?
Yeah, that's spot on, Bill. Well, I got a bit of an echo here. Let's see. I'm going to mute a couple of you guys. Testing. Nope, still there. Still there. Oh, okay, I muted Trish. Might have been you. No, and that's totally it. You can't pick your neighbors. You know what? Most tenants are really good, and if you've done your due diligence up front, likely you have probably really good tenants, and you're actually trying, and like you said as well, Bill, it's a bit of a middleman exercise of balancing expectations of both your tenant and your neighbors, and sometimes they're not aligned to what's practical or realistic. So trying to find that common ground. Trish, Giedre, what's your take on your neighbors with your rental properties, your experiences over the years?
I think I'm just gonna jump in straight to the examples. So the same myself. I had one property I just purchased and was planning to develop as a secondary suite. And the minute I took possession, we just started. Like you have your some companies coming doing estimates, like what's gonna cost, the renovation cost, and we started removing stuff. I got the letters in the mail right away that it's they doing the, because I saw the neighbor and I said hello and we spoke and I said, yeah, this is going to be a rental property. That's what it's my investment. And yeah, I got a letter that it's of the complaint as it's illegal secondary suite. We even didn't start
with the city sent you a letter saying,
so yes,
you've been reported.
Yeah, so good news is that city doesn't jump right away and gives you, penalties. They send you a letter, with a date when they're gonna come inspect. So, everything, those steps worked out. Follow up, and it's with no, but that's what kind of came out from that. But second story was a little bit different, and actually just not a while ago when the same I purchased a property, the same development of the basement, and just cutting the grass, bushes, trees, like things doing around the house, like maintenance this way, and I had some neighbors passing by, and and just came up conversation with the lady that, I really liked what you did here. So I gave her my business card. I'm like, yeah, this is a property. If anything, just let me know. So funny story that I got from that property. One neighbor wrote, I got again from the city a letter that my water spout is from the rain drains to his property. So I got a letter complaint that it has to be fixed. But when the hail hit the Calgary, I got from that lady who I spoke a call, and she said, do you know that your property has hail damage? All our area is hail damage. Tenant didn't notify, neither upstairs, neither downstairs, but the neighbor notified me that my property is damaged.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, like I said, you could choose a location, you could choose the property, what you're going to do with the property, you could choose your tenants, you have some kind of, but, the neighbors is neighbors.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and that's the silver lining or the win, the positive side of it. The pro is you've got, again, someone looking after your property. In this case for you, Giedre, someone told you, hey, you likely have you have hail damage. If you're not, get out to your property, take a look, and start looking at getting those repairs before the damage gets worse. So, okay, cool. So we've shared our different experiences. Let's talk about what we all do to start off on the right foot to build that, because I think we can generally agree here that having that relationship with your neighbors, it helps look after your property if something in the odd chance is going bad, as well as it's just good to know what's going on in the community as well, especially if you're not local. So I mean, both my properties, I'm in Calgary, I live in one community, and I have properties in two other communities. So I'm not local to what's going on. So it's good to know if something's going on, but in particular with city council, if there's land development. Actually, for example, with my property in Ogden, I have my house here, there's a house beside me, and then right in the corner was an old church. The city rezoned it for a multifamily purpose, and they wanted to put in a not-for-profit 4-story unit. I don't know how many, 4 levels. I don't know how many units, like 30 or 40 units for low-income housing families. And it was quite a bit of an uproar within the community. There's a lot of people protesting it. I didn't really know about it until I got told first by a neighbor. So something you kind of learn along the way as well. So I guess question to you guys as we kind of take this frame in the next step here. We've got these neighbors. Bill, I kind of want you to share us your story. We were talking before the break there of a challenging situation that you had come up where perhaps you had people reporting each of their rental units. How did that come up for you?
Well, that was I was trying to figure out the year when we started there. Somewhere around 2004, 2005, we had a property over in Calgary here in the Northeast. And my tenant got into a parking war with the other tenant. One of those poplar trees with the sticky little stuff that comes off of it. She didn't like parking underneath of it, so she parked in front of the neighbors all the time. They bickered back and forth to the point where they reported each other for parking and other stuff, which turned into be illegal suites and ended up shutting down our illegal suite. The other tenant got kicked out as well because they had an illegal suite over there, so it kind of backfired on everybody. And it was just one of those unfortunate events. and something you kind of live through. And another reason why we have to make our suites legal. Back in the day, as we like to say, things were a little bit more footloose and fancy free. But as we're moving forward here, down the pipe, it's going to be mandatory to be licensed, it sounds like, and make sure you've got all your permits in place, or it can get pretty nasty. And it's just a matter of finding out who your neighbors were. This is a particular time early in our career where we didn't exactly know who the neighbors were. And other times, as we've also talked about, when you know the neighbors, you find out things like hail damage. We've worked with multiple neighbors over the years, building new fences in between properties and sharing costs, and just taking care of things and looking after each other. And hey, we had hail damage on our roof. We've got these people coming out. You might want to talk to them. They're coming out anyway. That kind of stuff that you can share, and just be the good neighbor, even if you're not the true next door neighbor. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, and we've seen some other stories of neighbors. Well, let's switch gears here. Let's talk about maybe more of a difficult neighbor. Let's say I've heard stories in the group where people have had neighbors where they complain, let's say, about the parking, or they think that the tenant is. I'm trying to think of another one where there's too much traffic. They're coming and going, or things like that. So what would you guys say if you had a neighbor come to you raising some of these concerns, where some of them may be true, maybe not be true, maybe just be more of a preconceived notion that let's take parking. That's probably the most common objection I hear to secondary suites. How would you guys handle that? Who wants to take this question first? Bill.
Hi, how are you again?
Good.
You got to be upfront with the neighbor and deal with it. And that's the same with any of the issues you run into as landlords. You have to get ahead of it more than anything. So it comes up, you've got to discuss it with the neighbor. You kind of talk through with your tenant, and you establish the ground rules. And here in Calgary, and the rules differ from place to place, there is no parking in front of your house. It's street parking. So anybody can park there. There's no rules about it.
Property. No one owns it.
As long as that vehicle is registered, anybody can park there. And I've run into it in my personal residence, issues with that. I've run into it at rental properties with tenants complaining about neighbors parking in front of the property. It's just something you have to deal with. And you have that conversation with the neighbor. You have that conversation with the tenant. If it's possible, park in these spots. If it's not, you have to do what you've got to do. You've got a vehicle to park. It's not illegal for you to park in front of their house. Just make it maybe your last place that you look at instead of the first place that you look at.
Yeah, and don't park it if you don't have to, if there's lots of room in the street.
Just be upfront with them and explain to the other owner or even tenant, because quite often it's a tenant from another property that's doing the complaining, more often than not. And just break it out that you'll work with them, you'll try and make things work, and you'll try to get an end result that makes everybody happy. And you can't please everybody. So sometimes you just have to hold your ground and say, this is how it's going to work. I'm sorry. And you got to take it how you can. And back to, if you've got everything permitted properly and it's all legal, it's not going to be that much of an issue. It's just going to be a pain dealing with them more than anything. So yeah,
you highlighted a really good point there, Bill, about you don't want to have a liability that's going to get caught up or get wind of with the city. I'm basically referring to the legal suite, because I don't know about you guys. While my properties do okay and they do cash flow, I don't cash flow if I lose half my revenue. I'm not quite there yet. So I know legalizing is not an if, but when. I have to get it done. I've gotten one done, and I'm almost through my last of my suites to get legalized. So there's definitely. What I'm trying to get with this is, if you're in a position where you don't have any liabilities that could take you down, you're a lot more confident to go and approach a neighbor who, if they might blow some hot air and threaten you, it's not going to really do anything, because you're not at risk of losing half your revenue. If you're in a position where you could get shut down with a basement suite and you lose half of that revenue, you're going to be a lot more timid, a lot more precautious before you go into a conversation, because if it doesn't go the way you want, or the other person gets mad at your neighbor, it's almost like they can blackmail you in a sense, right? They go, oh, you know, I'm going to report you this time if you don't do this stuff, and all of a sudden now you're trying to unfairly manage a relationship when you're being told what to do, and then your tenant's going to probably wonder what's going on, especially if they start making unreasonable demands and you're too afraid because of losing half of your revenue. Trish, what would be your approach on this matter if you had a difficult tenant giving you trouble about your rental property? Oh, I think I got you on mute. Oh, okay, go ahead. You've got no audio. We can't hear you, Trish. Can you guys hear, or is it just me? No. Okay. Maybe Trish, try to play with your settings. We lost your audio. I can't hear you at all. Okay. Well, Trish does that.
Sign language there for a moment, so maybe that helped.
Yeah. So while Trish is going to do a check here, and Trish, just come back on and start talking when you come on, and we'll let you know when we can hear you. No, nothing there. Giedre, how would you deal with a difficult neighbor?
I think for me, right, you know, for me, I always start expectations for the tenant. So when I show the properties, and obviously it's always going to be the question about where the parking is. Mm-hmm. So that's typically that's my answer is, okay, typically the upstairs tenant parks in front, but however, this is a street parking. It doesn't mean that it's going to be always yours. And the basement tenants parks down in the back. Yes, that's what the parking area is there. However, again, if you please don't park in front of the. Typically I do ask them not to park in front of the neighbor's house, because that's what it is. But the designated area it is for them in the back. But they say, for your choice, if you want to park in front of the house, yes, you can. But if it's occupied, you cannot complain, because that's considered street parking, and it's everybody's. And again, obviously, like if it's 2 cars, then that's what it is. They're gonna need to drive a little bit farther and park somewhere else. Yes, like. That's kind of, because the city, again, you have secondary suites, you have to have 2 parking stalls. Yeah. I got fortunate enough that my parking stalls actually fits 3 cars. But it's upstairs. Usually they like to park in front of the house. So that's just manage expectations from the tenant, that you would not hear from them that's, neighbor parked and that's what's happening. So that's my approach. And so I never heard anything on that regard neither from neighbors, neither from tenants.
Yeah, I really like that approach, Giedre, that you've taken, where you're setting the expectations up front, and you're even telling them, you're not enforcing bylaws, because they're all, again, we've already talked about, there's no bylaws with street parking. Anyone can park with a registered vehicle, but you're telling your tenants, hey, like, just to fit in the neighborhood, the unwritten law is that's Big Joe over there. That's a spot for his big Dodge Dually. Don't take that spot. Yes. We'll be okay. So if you kind of do that expectation setting on how to fit into the community, you help your tenants avoid a lot of conflict right off the bat, which then saves you from receiving complaints down the road. So Giedre, I really like that approach that you're taking. Trish, you got sound yet? Can we hear you?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Opa. Okay, awesome. So Trish, what's your take on dealing with a more difficult neighbor and at one of your rental properties? How would you approach the situation?
Well, I warn people, because I've got 2 properties with difficult neighbors, and I warn the tenants, don't park here. Make sure you always, if you don't shovel the walk in the morning, or right away when it snows, they will phone the city every single time.
It's not if, it's a guarantee.
It's a guarantee, yeah. They're not asking, they're telling. And the same thing with parking. If you want to have a problem with them, then you're really dealing with it. But the truth of the matter is, one point that I'd like to make is, in neighborhoods like I'm in, and the neighbors are all owners, they're actually going to be in my life longer than any of my tenants.
This is true.
So it makes it really hard to walk a line between advocating for your tenants, because they're being unreasonable, and appeasing the neighbors, because you're stuck with them.
Yeah, that's totally true. So again, similar to your take with Giedre, you're saying, hey, this is the neighborhood what's that gossip, or here's how the down low in the neighborhood. This person complains. You just gotta be on top of the lawn cut and snow removal. It's an owner occupied neighborhood, so that's kind of how it rolls. If you want to rent this property, just telling you right now. And then I kind of wonder. So if you've got, you raised a really good point, Trish, about a neighbor. They're typically going to be around for a very, very long time, on average longer than most of your tenants. I think that's a very fair statement. If that's the case, I wonder if there's a way, something, I won't call it a peace offering, because I know we've talked about that with gifts when you first meet the people and stuff, but I almost wonder if there's something that you could give from your product, like what I'm thinking right now. So the way I made a really good friend with my one neighbor in Ogden is I went through this spring and I cut down some really old trees. So all my rentals have trees in the neighborhood of 50 to 70 years old. I got really big trees, and actually some of them have gotten to the point where if they were to fall, I would have no house probably, because they're big. So I went through and actually decided to cut a bunch of them down just to mitigate some risk and all that. And the one neighbor beside me in Ogden has a big, beautiful garden. He's very proud of it. He's a little bit lower income because he quite often tells me how he's not happy with how the city's spending, and when he's made notes of that. So I went and I had a big spruce tree that I cut down. I gave him usually I was planning to keep the wood as firewood for my tenants. It's like, oh, there's a freebie gift. I can give them firewood, doesn't cost me anything, and win-win for everyone. But I ended up giving a bunch of these big sliced logs to the neighbor, and he had it for his garden. And that's where now I get phone calls if there's any properties for sale in the neighborhood, because he's like, oh, MacKenzie, you should go buy more. You're a good landlord. But I'm wondering if there's a way. I mean, you obviously know who you have for neighbors, but if you've got maybe an adversarial foe as a neighbor, if there's an opportunity to turn them into an ally with some sort of play like that, maybe if you're cutting down trees, or perhaps if you're going to build a fence, maybe you replace some of their fence, or something where the cost to you is very minor, but it might have a big upswing for them. I'm not sure. Have you guys tried anything like that? Bill, have you done something like that in the past with your neighbors?
No, typically just become more confrontational with them. Kidding.
Oh, okay.
Kidding. It's a fine line. As landlords, and as entrepreneurs, we're kind of set in our minds and our ways and what we're going to do. And we have to be a little bit flexible. But ultimately, there are properties and there are babies, and the expectations that somebody else may have for what we're doing could be entirely different. And
totally.
You just have to try and make it work first and foremost. Be fair, but you also have to say, there's certain things that are beyond my control and we can't deal with. I'll talk to the tenants. I'll deal with this. I'll make sure that they're aware of this. I'll make sure they're shoveling on time and they're cutting the grass on time. But if they have a friend over who's parked in front of your house, you can't get mad at them and you can't get mad at me because there's only so much parking. So we've got to find that line where it works for everybody. And you will have those people that there is no line, that everything is wrong, and you just either have to deal with it or shunt them off to the side and ignore them. And it's case by case, but 90% of the time it's going to be easy. So don't fret about the bad ones. And that's what we often get caught up with. What about that bad tenant we're going to get? What about that bad neighbor? The majority of the time, it all works out fine. Be prepared to just work through it.
We really do. I know, Bill, that's great. Like, we really do worry about the what ifs, the worst case scenario, when 9 times out of 10 we'll never even cross that bridge. And I know I'm bad for that. I like to prepare 2 to 3 steps in advance, when typically I'm not even getting to those steps ever because I've already changed direction. But let's take this question by Lewis. I like this one, and this has actually been, this exact situation has been discussed, I know, at least 3 to 4 times within the year on our group. So my neighbor has a massive tree in his yard, and the branches extend into my property at least by 10 to 15 feet. I talked to him, and he's aggressively refused to do anything, and he doesn't want it to be touched. Tenants complain about the amount of work they have to do to clean up leaves, and it causes issues with my eavesdrop. City won't interfere. Oh, I find that interesting. Talking isn't an option with them anymore. What options do I have? So basically, let's see if we can help Lewis out in this situation. I definitely know with water irrigation, if there's things in your property sending water to a neighboring property, you do legally, but have to go and change it. I know that. I think Giedre, you might have talked about this too, where you had a water spout pointing to a neighbor and the water was running to their property, and you got a letter from the city saying, "Hey, you need to correct this, or there'll be further steps." What happened in that situation, Giedre?
Yeah, it's actually was quite simple because I just received the letter, and yeah, I just called the city, took the pictures, emailed them that it's fixed, and yeah, they didn't even came to inspect. Yes, but main one is obviously was with talking with the neighbor that he would not be, again writing the same thing. Yes, so no, that one went quite easily. It was pretty easy. With the tree, it's interesting that they would not interfere. Like I agree with you, but again, sometimes they say money talks. Yes, maybe is it the financial piece he doesn't want to cut, or he's really in love with the tree. Sometimes, it's a business. Again, it's so unique. Every situation is so different. Depends on the tree, depends on the tenant. Maybe that would be something similar situation. I had one when my big trees start touching the neighbor's garage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just, instead of trimming, it was like very similar cost. Like I think it was like $600 or something. I just went and cut the tree for $1,000. It's cost. Yeah, trees are a big issue, but I just cut it for the safety, would not fall down. That's my was. But it was my tree, so that's what I done. In this case, maybe you make some kind of financial agreement, but it's every case is so individual.
Yeah, I think at this point too is we're speaking from Calgary. There's also Edmonton, Red Deer, your Medicine Hatch, your Grand Prairies. There's probably a lot of devil in the details in your bylaws. So I mean, the one thing if you're dealing with a particular issue between neighboring and property lines is look at those bylaws and see what they are specific in your municipality. Don here with one of our sponsors, Edmonton Eviction Services, you can kind of stick over your fence. So I've heard this comment, and seems to be the consensus. I'm just repeating generally what's been discussed on our pages. Is folks says if there's landscaping or shrubs or branches over the property line coming into your property, that you've got the right to trim it back to the property line. But definitely, if it's impeding your and Bill's waving a hand here, if it's impeding water flow or has the potential to cause water damage by not allowing proper irrigation on your property, you can definitely. I'm going to go on a soapbox here and say that's something you can definitely go against. Were you going to add to that, Bill?
As Don said, typically that's the rule. If it's extending into your property, you can go ahead and trim it and cut it down. But Lewis has said the other landlord or the other owner is not very eager to have anybody touch a tree. Yeah. So turn it into an option situation. Here are the options. If you want to pay for lawn service to deal with the extra maintenance and the extra eaves trough stuff, we can carry on like this. Or if you'd prefer that we cut down the branches and clean up our side, we can go ahead with that. Which one would you prefer? Give them options instead of this is what's happening. And it's negotiation.
Yeah, totally. You're empowering him to solve his own problem by giving him the choice, even though you've actually picked every option that you're happy with. Yeah. So yeah, Lewis. I mean, you might be in a tough position because we're talking about the whole point of the show is try to be neighborly with your neighbors, even though you're not the one living in the rental, and trying to make those relationships. And yet we're probably telling you here, suggest, hey, I'm going to call the city and get bylaws involved. You can cut it down, or my cost, I'll go and cut it down, but I will have it done. What option do you want to pick? So bit of a fine line to walk there. So. Are there challenges? What about what's some other common problems you guys have heard of with neighbors that might be worth discussing here?
Noise issues. Noise seems to be a big one. And
ironically, it turns out that it's the neighbors that are worse than the tenants quite often. You know, but it happens everywhere. You know, somebody might have a backyard bonfire area, you know, fire pit out back, and they're out till, you know, 10, 11, 1 o'clock in the morning. You might have tenants that start work at, you know, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and people next door have got kids jumping on trampolines until, you know, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and they're supposed to be in bed for a couple of hours. So it's kind of a crapshoot at times, but you get into the right areas, you get the right property, and you just negotiate back and forth just to make sure everybody understands what's going on. And if you know what your neighbor profiles are, you know, you kind of work with your tenants to make sure you get the right tenants that are going to fit. If your neighbors have all got kids, wouldn't hurt to have more people with kids in your property. If nobody has kids around, you don't want to be the one standing out and having all these kids running around disappointing the other neighbors who like all their peace and quiet. If your neighbors are gardeners, you know, and you've got space for a garden, you know, kind of target somebody who's interested in gardening. Just kind of negotiate, you know, be kind of the grown up in the room and make things work.
I like that suggestion though, Bill. You're talking about, you know, try to bring light folks together so, you know, they're not stepping each other's toes. So you're saying, you know, don't put the family in the 55 plus building. Just might not fly with the kids that are 8 and 7 screaming down the hallways. You know, finding that right fit. I love it. Trish, what are some other common problems people might see as new landlords when they're trying to set that relationship with their neighbor?
I've found I have quite a bit of turnover at my places because a lot of my tenants will then buy a house. So these are responsible people with good credit ratings and everything, but they might not have the skill set yet for home ownership. And so sometimes they're not as good gardeners as the neighbors are. I had one person, I didn't find out until after they moved out, but they were constantly smoking pot. It was legal. They were constantly smoking pot on the deck because they're not allowed to smoke it in the house. And I guess the neighbors with kids had to explain to their kids what the smell was.
Yes.
You know, so there's...
Yeah. But you know, you raised a good point there, Trish. I didn't even think that, but and we've talked about it many times in the show past. Home ownership is not everyone. It's not common knowledge. If someone's never owned a property before, maintenance, all that kind of stuff, it's actually learned skill and knowledge, and you can't take that for granted. So, I mean, going back to what Bill said, trying to match the demographic trends, putting a tenant with life experience, maybe an older, mature tenant in their 30s or 40s, as opposed to someone, you know, early 20s, just experiencing the first taste of freedom outside of mom and dad's basement, might not be, again, the best fit. So matching that life skill to the neighborhood, if it's definitely more of an owner-occupied neighborhood, like the ones that some of your rentals are in, Trish, that's a good point. Giedre, your last take on this. What's some other, you know, common challenges or objections you hear from neighbors with your rental properties?
So it's obviously it would be the I didn't touch parking already and noise. But for me, to be honest with you, it's just I'm trying, like, especially in summertime. Yes, maybe winter I was not as active. You know, to go and to shovel the snow for my properties, kind of help out tenant, but it's the same me for the you know, be visible that's I am there. But in summertime, you know, I last and quite a few times when I just go and I cut that grass in front of the house, and I do trim, you know, bushes and little things like that. Just be present, and again, keep your property, you know, it's presentable for the for the neighbor. It shows that tenant that you care about that property. You're not only the landlord who just likes for checks and doesn't care about anything else. And another issue for me was garbage. Yes, especially with secondary suites, it was garbage. Like I had actually tenant requested, is any chance, you know, like in one bin doesn't fit, so they start piling there. So that's kind of things, because utilities I included, so all bills and comes to me. So all the recycling and the tax, how you should do it, have you purchase, they were not aware. Yes, like when is pickup garbage. So right now I just typically take a picture, send it to them. Anything city shares, that's what I share with them. And for the tax, they purchase themselves. But that's one thing what I wasn't aware that, like it's upstairs, downstairs, might not enough, one bin, not enough for them.
I thought in Calgary you had to have, all my properties, I've got 2 green bins, 2 blue bins, 2 black bins.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So I mean, we're going to talk from the Calgary perspective. I don't have one at my primary house, which has a legal suite. So I'm actually going to go follow up in the city in that, because with kids 1 and 5, number 1's about to turn 2. I have diapers and everything else. I'm filling up the garbage pretty regularly, so to have a second bin would be nice. But yeah, one of my rental properties has 2 sets of everything. So if you don't have 2 sets of bins and you've got a legal suite, and you have that second address, you should be able to get a second set of bins, which there you go. Maybe make sure you have that.
You're probably paying for the pickup.
Yeah, like through taxes, I guarantee. I saw my taxes go up this year, but anyways, I digress. That's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, that's a good point, Trish, because when you legalized it, they gave you a right away second bin, because
yes,
they never offered me anything. They offered me the second mailbox. That's what they did, but no, not in the bin. So actually, maybe that's how you see.
Yeah,
you're learning all the time.
Wasn't there a post a few months ago about this? Somebody had posted something about having an option to get actually a larger bin for a suited property.
Ooh, in Calgary?
Yeah, I thought that was here in Calgary. I thought this was this group.
Very well could be. We get about 20 posts a day. Sometimes I don't read them all, so quite possible.
Yeah. But there was something about an option for getting a slightly larger bin for basically the same price, or the multiple bins. It was a few months ago. I remember just kind of seeing it in passing, and I didn't have any knowledge about it. But
well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call. I'm going to assume it's city planning. I'm going to start there and let them direct me where I should go. Well, maybe I should call it 311. I'm going to say, hey, I just got my suite legalized, and I realized I never got my second set of bins. How do I go about collecting them? I'm going to start the conversation that way, that I already should have the bins, and see if they direct me to the right people to get a second set of bins sent over, because that'd be nice to have for sure. I just want to throw in what Don had said here. He raises a good point. I mean, I've never really done this. I don't know if it's quite in my comfort zone or if I want to. It does take a little bit of effort here, but have a barbecue or a neighbor or a community neighborhood get together, and then, like you said, most people probably don't show up, and then you already kind of said if they're not willing to show up, they're probably not going to complain to you, because you've given them that platform to get to know you, and then they haven't made that effort. Oh yeah, someone says right here, just ask waste and recycling in 311. Okay, I will do that. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'll report back with a post in the community, because oh, and this is Barbara. So yeah, no larger bins in Calgary. They're already large. So, but I'm gonna try to get a second set. So I'll try that tomorrow, and I'll report back to the group for the folks that don't have that second bin. So let's wrap up the show here. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to change angles and say, let's say we've got a really tough adversarial neighbor. You're getting to the point where there's harassment, there's text going on. They are harassing your tenants so badly that they want to break lease and move. You're in a very difficult situation, and maybe you've exhausted the possibilities of negotiating with this person, because they just have this certain type of personality that's very difficult to work with. If we're going to go down that legal route, what options do we have, even from a legal standpoint? I know Rob Bowe posted earlier about something called a peace bond. Have any of you guys heard of a peace bond before, or dealt with it? Yeah, Bill's shaking his head. I've not. It sounds like it's something to basically you agree on paper in court to not fight. It's basically the gist of what I got. I wonder if there's any value in a civil suit. If you've lost a tenancy or lost a tenant breaking a lease really due to an aggressive neighbor, is there value in maybe going to small claims and putting that through? Your guys' thoughts on that? Or are you digging yourself a hole that's not worth it? I don't know.
I think you're going down a dark road there. Depending on how nasty the neighbor is, you might be in a position you're never going to win. So a peace bond may be something that can buy you time, but you might just have the wrong property in the wrong place, and it might be one of those ones where you take the loss right now and move on and find something else. If you want to stick to your guns, then you've got to be aware that you may have more turnover, you may have more headaches, and that's part of the challenge of that property. So
it goes back to find that demographic that can deal with a bit of conflict, maybe.
Yeah, and it's and you don't know if that next tenant that you get in, because he happens to own a 1972 Camaro, which that guy had in his garage for 10 years and was going to fix up as well, that they become the best of buddies. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was two people just didn't get along for some reason because they did park in front of the house at the wrong day or the wrong time. So.
Or if you've got options, maybe you find that tenant that works shift work and they're out of town 2 to 3 weeks every month or something like that. Yeah. Trish, you're going to say something there.
Yeah, I don't know. Because, maybe you're right. Maybe you just sell it and cut your losses if it gets that bad. If the neighbor is harassing you and your tenant, and if there's no way out of that, then maybe the only thing you can do is just sell and move. Which would you be able to take them to small claims court for?
And just to point out, here we are looking at the dark side again. This is very, very rare. So everybody who's listening in, don't think of this as, oh my God, I got to prepare for this. This is not something you typically prepare for. This is, worst case scenario. And we don't like worst case scenarios. We're way smarter than that. We have much better luck than that, right?
Yeah. And Barbara says here, get a lawyer to put a strongly worded letter together, and then Don's saying restraining orders. So yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's not very common, for sure.
No.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is, you know what? I think one of the themes I've seen come out of the show tonight is there's just so many nuances, because we're talking about people and humans and relationships, and we're complex creatures. So you need a community, which really highlights the power of this group. We're just 4 landlords with 4 different paths of experience, and we're probably only covering the tip of the ice.
Kenzie froze.
Yeah, I think he had probably the best point of the whole night coming up right there. And he's back. We lost you for about 15 seconds there.
It says I've got bad internet. I think my kid's streaming Disney Plus right now, so I'll see if I can get in. I think the point was, if I don't freeze the game quickly here, post the question to the community. We've got so many different people in this community with different backgrounds and cultural understandings that lean on the expertise of the community, like crowdsource from the community. You'll find your answers. Like, for example, Chris would have been good on the show tonight. He's a retired police officer. He would have a very different approach than me, who does not like confrontation. I would tell you how to avoid the fight and give pieces of wood to the neighbor cut from the front lawn to make a peace offering, where Chris might say, you know what, this guy's not being nice to you. I'm not going to bend over backwards. And here's some more tactical approaches to find even ground to stop some of the harassment that's coming. So, I mean, and again, like you said, Bill, this is not very common anyways. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you guys want to wrap up on a final note here? We can end the show. Any last words here? Giedre, you've been quiet, so I'm going to throw it over to you before I freeze again.
Oh, she froze.
She froze.
My connection. I could see that I'm freezing.
All right, we'll come back to you, Giedre. You get to go last now, so you got downgraded.
Can you hear me, guys? Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, we can. Okay, Bill, any final words with dealing with neighbors?
It's luck of the draw, right? And And like you said, it's going to be how you deal with it. Part of the game of being a landlord is becoming kind of a people person. You may not necessarily want to be a people person all the time, but it's one of the skill sets that if you have, it just makes the whole business easier. And if you can talk to the neighbors when you're over there, when you can talk to the neighbors when you're buying the house, just to kind of get a feel for the neighborhood, all those little things will add up and make the whole experience easier. If you're making your tenants aware of the rules, as Giedre pointed out, this is where you should be parking, and this is, where things will work easier and make people happier. These are the expectations. Look out for Jim on the corner. Really nice guy, but particular. Just those little things to point everybody in the right direction and get it all happening.
Great points to end with. I like it, Bill. Trish, what's your final thought here?
My final thought is, we're part of such a great community with so many people from so many different areas of expertise that it's like, if you have a question about something, you know who to ask almost, through the community. And it's very comforting to know that we are a community and there's so many people behind us, with the same point.
Totally. And I'm going to ask the twins down below, but the one on the left. Giedre, I'll ask you first, and other Giedre, you can go second.
You know what?
With the same point.
As you start.
Totally.
Oops, what's happening here?
Oh, I think I got rid of your second feed there, so that might make it easier.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, I think, like the same, like it's I'll call myself Canadian now. Yeah, so we're Canadian.
Absolutely.
Good. You want to start from the good. Yes, like it's that. I think that going down the road, that's what end up the last resort. But to solve peacefully, that's what it is. Even the like if you go the back eviction tenants, yes, like you have to show that you tried, you put your best foot forward. You always were reasonable, like it's your expectations. You manage your expectations, and your expectations are reasonable. And like we are good people. Let's start from the being a good landlord first, and then everything should lay out on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Start from a position of trying to build the relationship and see where it goes from there. So, and a lot of stuff seems like super common sense, but when you go back and see some of the problems that do arise, it typically when there's been a breakdown in one of these things that we've talked about tonight. I'm going to actually use Barbara's tip. I think it was pretty good and on point there. Is not talk to one neighbor, but talk to all the neighbors in the neighborhood. And maybe, you know what, if three of the neighbors say, neighbor Joe over there is kind of a stick in the mud, they might have tips to how to work with that stick in the mud because they've been around the guy for 10 years and they know what makes him tick. So great points, Barbara, you brought up. Don't speak to one neighbor, but get a bit of a consensus from the neighborhood to see what's going on. And always, provide a channel of communication. I've done it as well. I've given out business cards to have them reach out to me if there's any issues. I said, hey, if something's going wrong, grass is not being cut, there's something going on, there's garbage in the backyard, I want to know because I want my rental. I want to provide quality rentals that provide good homes for people that I would want to live in, and I want to be a good representation. I want to be a good neighbor. So if you're seeing something that's not meeting that standard, let me know and I'll help you fix that so you can be happy with me being your neighbor, even though I'm in another community. So great points, everybody. Let's wrap up the show at that point. It is actually exactly 8 o'clock, so we're being very timely tonight. It's nice out there, a little bit windy, but we've been enjoying some sun lately, and summer's right in the doorsteps right now for us. So, folks, get out there. We've got restrictions lifting, get some golfing, get some socializing. Let's have a beautiful summer, and we'll catch you next time on the Alberta Landlord Shoptalk show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a great night.
Yeah.